So, no, we're not a cell-based church. Don't hope to be. And the price of not being is far higher than the price of being, because it's very popular. And to question it, boy, it's been amazing, the energy. You know, you can be the Antichrist for questioning a fad. And but I have to say that it's not God's highest heart. It's identified the problem well in most cases, but the solution still has man's fingerprints all over it. The control of don't do this and do this and this gimmick and that gimmick, and how to have a conversation with a type A unbeliever. Egads, you know, that is so unlike Jesus of Nazareth. You know, a script for type A and type this and that. You know, it's psychology applied to the problem of trying to solve God's problem of these churches that are unfruitful. And it strikes me very much as the Ishmael and Isaac problem, where Abraham had the right idea, he was called by God to do the right thing, the vision was correct, and he had unwavering faith, and yet his mind said, we can do this thing, we can accomplish this task through Hagar, the logical way. The child born in the logical way will always persecute the child born in the Spirit. It is the same now. Paul said, it is the same now. If you try to add man's way to accomplish God's purpose, you're going to birth Ishmael, who's going to persecute the child born in the Spirit. Eventually, you're going to have chaos and frustration. Things were pretty peaceful with Ishmael for a while, but once Isaac was born, we had a big problem on our hands. And it's the same way now. What's born of God's heart, God's man going to bed with man's psychology, or man's way to accomplish a task, you're going to end up with Ishmael, not Isaac, not laughter, but rather confusion and mocking and a headbutting eventually later on. Most of the problems that we would identify as the typical church problems, frankly, we haven't had in the last 8 years. If I had to list the 35 ugliest things I've ever seen in church situations, or things that people write to us about, 34 of them would be totally gone, non-existent. The question would never even come up in 34 out of 35 of those problems. If we were doing things God's way, rather than trying to do God's task in man's way. We've invented, by birthing Ishmael, we've invented most of the things that are called church problems. The church world has. If you'll do things God's way, rather than man's way to accomplish God's purpose, then 34 out of your 35 worst problems will go away, I assure you. And we know this by experience as well as biblical testimony.
Is there an example?
Well, headbutting in men's business meetings is, how common is that? The little coup attempts and the power struggles and grumbling about the sermon on the way home. And a pastor told me once, he said, he was a youth pastor, and he said, boy, I had all these great ideas for the teens, and there's so many problems, so much immorality and drinking and stuff with the teens in our youth program. And so I called all the parents together for a meeting to talk about these things and try to work them out. And not one single parent of all of our teens even attended. No one showed up. I was the only one in the room. And, that kind of problem is just all over the place. But when a Christian is properly defined and a church is properly defined and leadership is properly defined, that's unthinkable. There's a mega church in the southeast that a good friend of ours is there regularly working with them, and they have multiplied thousands on Sunday morning, like 8,000 I think. And I just asked the question kind of sideways, how many on Wednesday night? 200. 200. I said, what would happen if at 2 in the morning people got a call on a regular basis, it would require them driving for half an hour or whatever, that there's going to be a baptism at 2 in the morning. It's winter. It's going to be in a fountain in the square or something like that. How many people would show up? Even the 200? Well, probably not. Well, a church that's really the church at 2 in the morning, 100% of the church longs to be there. If a few have to stay behind with sick children or whatever, they do it with regret, not because they have to work the next morning. See? So, I mean, I've been in so many, quote, pastors' meetings where, well, we had a volunteer day last week and last Saturday, and not a single person showed up, or only 12 people out of 4,000 showed up for the work day, and all the other pastors patting them on the backs as well. Life's just like that sometimes. It's tough out there, but you just need to go on serving God. Well, I find great fault with that, because the vast majority of those 4,000 people, given the proper life around them, the proper organic environment, if you put the orange tree in Florida rather than in Alaska, it will flourish. It will bear much fruit. If we bring the soil, the fertilization and the water and the sunlight and the heat and the warmth that it needs, the seed will grow. The seed is good in most cases. It's the environment that's bad. It's not an Acts 2 environment, because we've written that off as cultural rather than obedience to Jesus' commands. And so for that reason, we've excused all the compromise. The leaven in the batch is not our problem. We've obliterated Matthew 13 to say that the field where the wheat and the tares grow up is the church, so there's nothing we can do about it. Jesus said the field is the world. The wheat and the tares grow up together in the world. You're in the world, but not of it. And yes, the enemy has sown enemies of the church and of the cross in the world, but he hasn't sown them in the church. That negates entirely 1 Corinthians 5, where the Scriptures clearly say to get the leaven out of the batch. Don't eat with them, don't associate with them, expel them from your midst. That we're to judge those in the church. God judges those outside. I mean, all those things are in the Scriptures. Jesus wrote the whole Word of God. And so, for that reason, I think it's fair to say when he said the field is the world, not the church, but the world, the wheat and the tares grow up together in the world, not in the church, then it's fair for us to say that leaven in the batch is a problem, and biblically we have to be able to do something about it. If we can't, then there's something entirely wrong with our environment. If it takes legalism to deal with it, then we don't have any relationship. Legalism is not the answer, nor is neglect of the Word of God and letting a little leaven everybody's life. That's disobedient, and it's unmerciful to the people that we love. So, all these things that go on with the pastors bemoan year after year after year and then just harden themselves. Well, my job's just to preach the Word, and then whatever happens, happens. It's on their head, not mine. That's how most people have eventually hardened themselves, because they can't find the answers. They're not finding the organic life and the solution to the problem. So they harden themselves to it rather than die out of the agony of seeing all these problems happen year after year. They exert great power and authority, and they control men, and they manipulate, and they're legal in the way they control their domain. Or they just totally neglect the whole thing and give little happy sermons with cute illustrations. She was a teenager. She lived in Nebraska. They go through all this nonsense in order to appeal to men and to maintain their power through being really neat or fun or funny people, or they maintain their power through an iron fist. But none of that is God's heart and will. His desire is an organic priesthood of believers that solves those same problems. So 34 out of 35 problems don't even exist. They don't even come up when the church is really the church. You don't even have to solve them from legalism or pacifism or neglect. They're solved through relationship. You never even see them, because the person that's involved, the people that are involved daily in their lives, are already helping to restore them and identify those things and bring light into their lives and change them into Christ's image.
Thanks for that very thorough answer. Next.